Hey there, this is Mr. Icarus, and welcome to yet another edition of Doom Mod Madness. This time round, we're checking out Dead.Air, which is yet another creation of prolific WoD author Zazer. Seriously, the guy has a very long list of creations to his name, one of which we've previously covered here on Doom Mod Madness. You may recognize it under the name of Zen Dynamics. In contrast to Zen Dynamics' multi-level campaign, however, this is simply a single map creation, and takes place in what I can only assume is some kind of cyberpunk-ish virtual reality type realm gone wrong. We've also got some unique weapon varieties here. Instead of the regular pistol, we've got ourselves a pew-pew laser gun, always a fan. We've also got ourselves some interesting enemy variants to contend with here in Dead.Air 2. Nothing too drastic in terms of changes, more cosmetic than anything, but still, some of those changes rather disconcerting, but let's get into the meat of the mod, shall we? I love that transition, by the way. Takes you out of that atmospheric metallic hallway into the more grittier environments of this seemingly Quake-inspired city location. I think it's fairly safe to say that the pacing of this particular map is a lot more intense than its opening section implies. I mean, if you were going to go by that opening section alone, you'd think that this was going to be a pretty slow-paced, heavily reliant on atmosphere type deal, with not really all that many enemies to actually deal with. But the place is caked in corpses. We've been running and gunning like crazy, but even then, it still manages to retain this air of creepiness, and that is helped along immeasurably by these particular cacodemon variants. Good God, just look at them. Just listen to the sound they make. They're friggin' horrifying. So yeah, whoever's responsible for the creation of those googly-eyed abominations, cheers for that. I've now got something new to haunt my nightmares for a long time to come, and you know what? The nightmares don't stop there, because there's also the introduction of the no-face pinkies. These aren't quite as horrifying as the cacodemons, but there's still something supremely unsettling about them. The fact that they have this weird muffled scream when they spot you, and yeah, everything is geared just to make you pucker your asshole ever so slightly. Another interesting thing I discovered about this mod is that it finds a way to keep your pew-pew laser gun relevant, and what you can do at certain points is pick up upgraded forms of that weapon as you progress through this map. So it's not something that you'll use maybe once or twice, maybe just at the start of the map. It's something that you can actually return to multiple times throughout the course of Dead.Air, and it still remains useful. That said, it still kind of pales in comparison next to the other weaponry you can get your hands on here in Dead.Air. Case in point, the double-barreled flak cannon here, at least that's what I assume it is. It's a rather damn satisfying weapon to use. As you can see, it tears through the no-face pinkies, as it does most other enemies here. And we've also got our hands on an invincibility sphere. Now, the reason why I bring up this very obvious point is because this is only a feature of this map on difficulties below Hurt Me Plenty. If you're playing on Hurt Me Plenty or above, you won't get this kind of assistance. It'll just be you against the horde, and your dodging skills best be on point, because there's going to be a lot of revenant projectiles to dodge, there's going to be a lot of beaky-faced imp fireballs as well, and I'm pretty sure the number of enemies is also increased as a consequence. When it comes down to it, surviving most of the encounters here in Dead.Air will come down to your ability to stay on the move and weave your way through hordes of enemies. This one's a particularly good example here, facing down a street full of faceless pinky abominations. Another interesting thing about this encounter is that you'll also be dealing with these freaky eyeless variants of the beaky imps, and these are a lot more aggressive than the normal variety. They'll rapid fire their fireballs, and it just adds this nice level of intensity to the encounter. It's not just weaving between the pinkies you gotta worry about, you've also got those rapid fire fireballs. I suppose it's kind of testament to the tweaking of difficulty here that even though it's an order of magnitude easier than Hurt Me Plenty difficulty, it's still challenging. It's still something that feels satisfying to overcome. I think one of my favorite parts of Dead.Air has to be this one. This comes about, I'd say, halfway through, and basically gives you a choice. You can choose red, green, or blue. And after you've made your choice, you start a gauntlet of sorts. A gauntlet that will introduce you to 3 new weapons, and also 3 interesting arena-type environments. And the transition to them is just friggin' great. I love that. It's fantastic. And each one of these arenas here have their own particular thing going on as well. This one, for example, is full of winding staircases and towers. The aim is to reach the top of the towers and flick the switches in order to progress, all the while getting to grips with this kind of unusual addition to the armory here. This is some kind of grenade launcher, and in all honesty, it's pretty unwieldy to actually use. The rounds don't lob very far, you've got to make sure you land direct hits if you want to deal immediate damage, and it makes a little bit of an interesting change from traditional late-game weaponry, where usually a mod or WOD is very eager to chuck something immediately useful and powerful in your hands and just let you kind of go hog wild. Now, you have to learn the ropes of this one. You have to have a little patience with it. That said, you're not exactly beholden to this particular weapon. You don't have to use it. If you find it unenjoyable, you can quite easily get through the section with some of the other weapons currently in your arsenal. And one of the more interesting things about this entire section is that you don't have to tackle it in any initial set order. You might have gone through the blue door first, you might have gone through the red door, and as a result, you may have picked up something a little bit more, let's say, entertaining to use. Entering the red arena, we're granted access to the fusion mortar, a much more, let's say, accessible weapon than the grenade launcher type of the previous arena. And the way this one works is also in direct contrast to that weapon, because rather than dealing direct hits, it's actually more advisable to skim the side of your enemy's location with this weapon, because there's an area of effect around the projectile itself, meaning that if you can shoot it alongside the area where all the enemies are, then you'll deal damage all along their ranks, all the way to the back wherever the projectile travels. It's a nice little spin, it's a nice little quirk of the weapon, and as you can clearly see, the arena itself seems to be designed around the quirks of the weapon itself, encouraging you to play with it in that particular fashion. Last but not least, the blue arena section introduced me to the heavy nail gun, a admirably chunky looking weapon, and one that deals quite a lot of direct damage. It's pretty satisfying to fire, and pretty useful to have during this particular section, because the blue arena here is actually quite possibly one of the most challenging out of the lot. As you progress down its corridors, you'll find that the walls drop and introduce more and more enemies into the mix, opening this central area up into a bigger and bigger space in order for you to adequately navigate your way between the fireballs and the faceless abominations and eyeball-spewing cacodemons in your way. I think it's safe to say that out of the three arenas you'll run through here, the blue one is probably the one you want to save for last. The one that you'd want to tackle with a full complement of weaponry in your armory. Even then, I'm a little intrigued to see how this would play as my primary pick for the arena gauntlet. It certainly must be balanced in some form or another for that kind of play, otherwise they wouldn't give you the option in the first place. So, in that regard, Dead.Air certainly has a little bit of replayability to it. Not just playing on a higher difficulty, but playing these arenas in a slightly different order. Did I say last but not least at the start of the previous section? Well, I lied. Let me introduce you to the Antimatter Driver. This is the final weapon in the Dead.Air arsenal, and it's pretty much required for the fight that we are about to embark on. Because this right here is the final arena of Dead.Air, bringing together the three colors of the arenas we've previously fought through, and generally crapping on us from a great height with pretty much every monster we've had to fight through so far. And it's here that you're gonna have to summon all of your skill, all of your ability, and you've got to be pretty smart with how you use these power-ups as well. I mean, going for the invincibility sphere is pretty much going to be a given after a certain point, because just look at it. It pretty much turns into a monster mosh pit after a while. But even then, this is a situation where you're gonna have to pace yourself if you want to get all the way through to the end. In all honesty, at this particular point right here, I thought I was nearly done and dusted with Dead.Air, and it's hard not to see why, what with the arena completely caked in the corpses of my enemies and just a few loose stragglers left to take care of. But that statement earlier about having to pace yourself, yeah, there's a good reason for that, because that was just wave 1 of 3. Now, normally I'd regard something like that as a little bit of a dick move, especially after having to take care of so many bloody enemies, but in all honesty, this is a really well-paced final encounter. That first wave, for example, you've got all of those power-ups to help you through, the invulnerability sphere, the mega sphere, the invisibility sphere, and then by the time this wave kicks in, you've got a lot more space to play around with, a lot more space to kite those cacodemon projectiles and just generally take care of business. It never really feels like the mod is at any point trying to flip the bird at you. Then it does flip the bird at you with this final encounter right here. Yes, that is a horde of cyberdemons. Yes, those are homing rockets. Fuck that encounter in particular, but everything else, golden. I love it. It's fantastic. Great visuals, great gameplay, fun weaponry. But yeah, that very last part right there, that's the kind of thing where I was getting a little too exhausted to want to carry on without spamming the resurrect command. But if you're interested in checking it out, by all means check the link in the description below. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Feel free to let me know what you thought in the comments, and feel free to suggest any mod you'd like to see me cover in future episodes of Doom Mod Madness. This has been Mr. Icarus, desperately trying to dodge homing missiles. Icarus out.